For believe me, the secret for harvesting from existence the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment is to live dangerously, build your cities on the slopes of Vesuvius, send your ships into uncharted seas, live at war with your peers and yourselves. The gay science, it sounds fabulous, and honestly, it is, right up until it drags you into a philosophical abyss. The gay science is above all a testament to healing after sickness, a healing that Nietzsche himself went through and a healing that our sick culture must go through. Nietzsche himself describes the gay science as one of his most personal works. The title and the subtitle of the book have three distinct meanings. First, it refers to the troubadours, poets from southern France active in the 12th and 13th centuries. The term Gaia Scienza signified the artful, musical and lyrical approach of the troubadours to knowledge and life. Gaia Scienza was light in tone but profound in substance, exactly the kind of spirit Nietzsche was drawn to. Nietzsche draws on this tradition to shape his own philosophy of joyous wisdom, irony and vitality, setting it in contrast to the heaviness of modern philosophy. The gay science contains more poems and songs than any other of his books, also reflecting this reference to the troubadours. Secondly, the word gay can also convey a sense of lightheartedness and vitality. Nietzsche himself describes what gay science means in the preface of his book, Gay Science, that signifies the saturnalia of a spirit who has patiently resisted a terrible, long pressure patiently, severely, coldly, without submitting, but also without hope, and who is now all at once attacked by hope, the hope for health, and the intoxication of convalescence. This book was written during a period of convalescence, a recovery from illness that Nietzsche endured for much of his life. But Nietzsche also deliberately adopts a tone of gay science to counter the weighty, somber tone of traditional philosophy. Thinkers like Kant and Hegel, with their dense moral frameworks, represent exactly the kind of seriousness Nietzsche wants to break away from. Instead, he champions a lightness of spirit, a philosophy that plays, risks and laughs against what he would call systems of resent. The third meaning carries a deeper nuance. The title can also suggest a kind of grimace, a bitter smile in response to the heavy burden we must bear, as Nietzsche describes. His philosophy comes with a stark warning. Our culture is afflicted, and this sickness leads to a profound crisis. If we fail to confront it with lightness and courage, we risk falling into resentment. Hence the bitter smile as we face the weight of existence. The first English translation was titled The Joyful Wisdom, but this misses a crucial nuance. The word gay carries connotations of a sort of light-hearted defiance. It is a nod to the ideal of the free spirit, a central theme in Nietzsche's work during that period. The German word Wissenschaft translates strictly as science, not wisdom. However, science in this context doesn't refer to modern empirical science or to established knowledge. Instead, it points to the ongoing pursuit of knowledge that is inherent to all science. The first 4 books of the gay science were written between 1881 and 1882, with Nietzsche working across Genoa, Nice and Sils Maria. It was published in 1882. The book is written after Human All Too Human and before Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The book reflects Nietzsche's continued break with Romanticism, Christianity and metaphysical philosophy. The gay science marks a transitional work in Nietzsche's philosophy, bridging his earlier thinking with the more radical ideas that would define his later works. The gay science serves as a prelude to Nietzsche's greatest work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Fittingly, it ends with the very first paragraph of Zarathustra, foreshadowing this philosophical shift that follows. The style of the book blends songs and brief fragments with more extended passages, all presented in Nietzsche's characteristic aphoristic form. After breaking with his former publisher in 1886, Nietzsche sought to renew interest in his earlier works under a new publishing house. To that end, he revised and expanded several of them. In 1887, he released a second edition of The Gay Science, adding a 5th book with a new preface and an appendix of poems titled Songs of Prince Vogelfrei. For now, we will focus on the original 4 books in this video, as these are the original book. From these 4 books, the last one is undoubtedly the most important to understanding Nietzsche's philosophical ideas. For structural purposes, I will at times summarize key takeaways out of individual texts to create an overview of the argument one might derive from Nietzsche's work. This will help us to recognize these same points in other texts. While many Nietzsche scholars might disagree with this method, it is the easiest way to present something that resembles a theory. Without any further ado, let's get into the book. The Gay Science starts with a text titled "The Teachers of the Object of Existence." It handles those individuals who attempt to divine or reveal the purpose of human life. The first paragraph of this text goes as follows: "Whether I look with a good or an evil eye upon men, I find them always at one problem, each and all of them, to do that which conduces to conservation of the human species, and certainly not out of any sentiment or love for this human species, but simply because nothing in them is older, stronger, more inexorable, and more unconquerable than that instinct, because it is precisely the essence of our race and herd." Nietzsche speaks here of an instinct, the inherent drive to seek and need meaning in life. As human beings, we crave purpose, direction, and something to anchor our existence. While this search appears deeply human, Nietzsche suggests that it wasn't always so. In earlier times, this need for meaning may not have existed, yet we cannot return to this era. We are left with the reality that we are, by nature, searching creatures, constantly seeking meaning in our lives, or as Nietzsche puts it in the text. But with all this corrective laughter, human nature has on the whole been changed by the ever-new appearance of those teachers of the design of existence. Human nature has now an additional requirement, the very requirement of the ever-new appearance of such teachers and doctrines of design. So the key takeaway in the beginning of this book is the following: human beings have a fundamental need for meaning in life. This search for purpose is not just a preference but an instinct, an essential part of what it means to be human. This text is followed by another titled "The Intellectual Conscience," which criticizes people who blindly follow these teachings and doctrines on the meaning of life without clearly thinking about them. Here, the ideal of the free spirit which dominated Nietzsche's thought in his time is first shown. Nietzsche uses it to describe a person who has liberated himself from conventional beliefs, particularly religious, moral, and cultural dogmas, and dares to think independently. For Nietzsche, the prevailing moral framework of our time stands in opposition to life itself, as it promotes the denial of desire, instinct, and vitality in favor of restraint, self-denial, and otherworldly values. A free spirit is one who has freed himself from these restrictions. A second key takeaway for Nietzsche is the realization that our traditional moral frameworks, such as Christianity, are fleeting. Through our critical mindsets, the belief has dwindled. Meaninglessness or nihilism is becoming predominant. In Book 3, Nietzsche's first text, New Struggles, addresses this point by describing his famous idea of the death of God for the very first time. After Buddha was dead, they still showed his shadow in a cave for centuries. A colossal, horrible shadow. God is dead, but given the way people are, there may still be caves for millennia in which his shadow is displayed, and we must still defeat his shadow as well. This text has multiple layers. First, it shows that even though we are losing our belief in an omnipotent God, that does not mean that the whole framework collapses all at once. The full collapse still needs time, but is inevitable, an idea further explored in the upcoming fragment. Second, the cave is a reference to Plato's allegory of the cave, where he illustrates how people can be trapped in ignorance, mistaking shadows on the wall for reality, until they are freed and come to understand the true nature of existence. Ironically, he uses it to show that the ideas of Plato himself are one of those shadows on the wall that we are losing. Third, Buddhism was, in the 19th century, widespread around Europe through the many expeditions that were being done. Interesting here might be that the teachings of Buddhism have a cyclical nature. Once they have been forgotten, a new Buddha is born to spread his message once more. To summarize, two key takeaways. Humans have developed an instinct or nature that dictates them to find a meaning for life. Our traditional moral frameworks, such as Christianity, are fleeting. Nietzsche's proclamation of the death of God is among his most famous ideas, yet it is often misunderstood. A newcomer to his work might assume it simply reflects his atheism. In truth, it does the opposite. It is addressed to non-believers, showing them that, despite their disbelief, they too remain entangled in the spiritual sickness of the age. Here, we can bring together the previous two key takeaways with a third one. Humans need a meaning in life. Our traditional meaning is fleeting, and the third key takeaway, there is no inherent or objective meaning to life. These 3 points together form what Nietzsche calls the sickness of our time. That we need meaning, that our current meaning is fleeting, and that life is inherently meaningless. This is the nihilistic tendency that we are confronted with within his text, The Madman. The text, The Madman, starts with a group of disbelievers gathered at a marketplace. A madman enters the market in broad daylight. He has a lit lantern and starts frantically asking them whether they know where God is. "Whither is God?" he cried. "I will tell you, we have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun?" We are once more confronted with the erosion of our moral foundations. Yet it is a madman who is proclaiming this message. Why would Nietzsche use a madman to convey one of his most important messages? The irony, although a madman speaks, he speaks the truth. Yet in the eyes of the people on the market, who represent Nietzsche's contemporaries, there is no reason to worry. The madman confronts them with the affliction of nihilism, yet no one listens. Here, the madman fell silent and looked again at his listeners, and they too were silent and stared at him in astonishment. At last he threw his lantern on the ground and it broke into pieces and went out. "I have come too early," he said then. "My time is not yet." If life is inherently meaningless and people have not yet realized the implications, then Nietzsche must reflect on how we can confront the death of God. Nietzsche's answer? To become gods ourselves. That is the conclusion of Nietzsche's 3 key insights. If we need meaning, cannot derive it from our traditional framework, and life is inherently meaningless, then we must create meaning on our own. For Nietzsche, this would be a godlike achievement, unlike anything witnessed in a very long time. First, we must accept the inherent meaninglessness of the world, its coldness and senseless suffering. Only through this acceptance can we begin to create new values, and thus we arrive at the 4th book of the gay science. These 3 key takeaways serve as its starting point. The book opens with the chapter Sanctus Januarius, a title that operates on several symbolic levels. On the one hand, the reference points to the Christian martyr Saint Januarius, patron of Naples, whose miraculous blood is said to liquefy at certain moments of the year. This saint thus embodies the themes of renewal, transformation, and the mysterious conversion of life and death. By invoking him, Nietzsche hints at a kind of sanctification of the cyclical, an affirmation of recurrence that does not rely on dogma but resonates with the rhythm of becoming. At the same time, Januarius evokes Janus, the Roman god of thresholds, transitions, and beginnings. Janus looks both forward and backward, embodying the paradoxical coexistence of past and future. In this sense, Nietzsche's gesture is profoundly Janus-like. It gazes into what has been and simultaneously into what is yet to come, fusing memory with anticipation. The Sanctus of Januarius then becomes less the sanctity of a churchly figure and more the sanctity of the threshold itself, the holiness of saying yes to time in all directions. Thus, the figure of Sanctus Januarius in the gay science carries a dual resonance: the Christian saint whose blood is a sign of renewal, and the pagan god of openings whose 2 faces reflect the eternal return of beginnings. Nietzsche brings these layers together in his 4th book. In a letter to Peter Guest, a good friend and confidant of him, he writes on this 4th book: "Above all, Is Sanctus Januarius at all comprehensible? After everything I have experienced since I am among men, my doubt about that is tremendous. Nietzsche underscores the significance of this fourth book as it marks the first occasion on which he articulates many of his most pivotal ideas. The opening text of the fourth book, entitled For the New Year, takes the form of a New Year's wish, in which Nietzsche articulates his hopes for the coming year. Such wishes are, of course, a traditional custom, but here they also reveal the originality and creative style with which Nietzsche writes. So what does Nietzsche wish for in this new year? To love fate, to love the ugliness of life, its pointless suffering and meaninglessness, or as he writes, for the new year, I still live, I still think. I still have to live, for I still have to think. Sum ergo cogito, cogito ergo sum. Today, everybody permits himself the expression of his wish and his dearest thought. Hence I too shall say what it is that I wish for myself today, and what was the first thought to run across my heart this year. What thought shall be for me the reason, warranty and sweetness of my life henceforth. I want to learn to see more and more as beautiful what is necessary in things. Then I shall be one of those who make things beautiful. Amor Fati, let that be my love henceforth. The acceptance of the inherent meaninglessness of life is captured in Nietzsche's phrase Amor Fati, which translates to love of fate. What is the ugliness in life? That our life and suffering is without inherent meaning, yet we can still see it as necessary through our own strength of mind. That is what Nietzsche would deem a godlike act. Where Schopenhauer would choose pessimism towards his truth, Nietzsche differs. Amor Fati refers directly to the text of the death of God and the title of the book. To accept the heaviness and ugliness of the death of God, one must confront it with a light-hearted spirit. Resent for life will only weigh us down. If you want to see a more in-depth video on this New Year's wish, check out the full video we did on this text last year. To fully accept the inherent meaninglessness of life, Nietzsche conceives of a thought experiment. Nietzsche fittingly names this thought experiment the heaviest weight. For to him, it is no easy task to bear. He first conceives of it in Sils Maria during a solitary walk by the lake of Silvaplana. This heaviest weight is none other than the thought experiment of the eternal return. The heaviest burden. What if someday or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say to you, this life, as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live it once more and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it, but every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh must return to you all in the same succession and sequence, even this spider and this moonlight between the trees and even this moment and I myself. The eternal hourglass of existence is turned over again and again, and you with it, speck of dust. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered him, you are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine? If this thought were to gain possession of you, it would change you as you are, or perhaps crush you. The question is, each and everything, do you want this once more and innumerable times more? Would lie upon your actions as the greatest weight, or how well disposed would you have to become to yourself and to life to crave nothing more fervently than this ultimate, eternal confirmation and seal? Nietzsche has the radical idea that one must live as though every moment were to be repeated endlessly, in exactly the same succession for all eternity. While it is also presented as a physical theory, I would like to emphasize that Nietzsche uses it for its psychological weight. This is Nietzsche's answer to the sickness of our times. If one is able to accept the inherent meaningless to life and suffering, one is capable of overcoming oneself. It is at this exact point that Nietzsche's book Thus Spoke Zarathustra starts. Zarathustra is both the preacher of the teachings of, as well as on a journey of overcoming himself. And thus comes the last section, entitled Incipit Tragoedia, translated to Tragedy Begins. In this fragment, Zarathustra, an old prophet of Zoroastrianism, gives up his serenity of his 10 years of solitude and decides to go down among men. When Zarathustra was 30 years old, he left his home and the lake of Urmi and went into the mountains. There he enjoyed his spirit and his solitude, and for 10 years did not weary of it. But at last his heart changed, and rising one morning with a rosy dawn, he went before the sun and spoke thus to it. You great star, what would be your happiness if you had not those for whom you shine? The end of the gay science is also the beginning of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche's most revered book. If you want to learn more about this book, then you should check out our full video on Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The closing words of this section are deliberately ambiguous. They go as follows. Thus began Zarathustra's downgoing. In German, however, untergehen can mean both to go down but also to drown or to perish. For my own reasons, I choose to interpret these words as thus began Zarathustra's destruction. Why should you read Nietzsche's The Gay Science? The Gay Science marks the beginning of a new period of powerful thought, containing many of Nietzsche's most important ideas. He writes in short, intense flashes, numerous throughout the book, which he himself compares to cold baths. For I approach deep problems such as I do cold baths, fast in, fast out. That this is no way to get to the depths, to get deep enough, is the superstition of those who fear water, the enemies of cold water. They speak without experience. Thus you are invited in the cold water of the gay science. While Nietzsche introduces a lot of new concepts, what one might miss when reading the gay science's first 4 books is the concept of the Übermensch, which is actually only presented in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and the concept of the will to power, which seems to dominate Nietzsche's later works. What should be our key takeaways from this book? First of all, human beings have developed a fundamental need for meaning in life. Our moral frameworks, like Christianity, are fleeting. Life is inherently meaningless, it is harsh, and suffering is prevalent. Nietzsche concludes that our culture is sick. Nihilism presents itself. Nietzsche's conclusion is that we must live in acceptance of this reality and shape our values accordingly. In his thought experiment of the eternal return, this acceptance is taken to its radical extreme. For Nietzsche, to embrace one's bleak fate is a godlike feat, attainable by only extraordinary human beings. This marks the starting point of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, where he introduces the idea of the Übermensch. Personally, this is one of my favorite works by Nietzsche. It contains some of his wittiest and most beautiful passages. For instance, the aphorism "star friendship," which completely overwhelmed me the first time I read it. And thus, the memory of our former friendship should become more sacred. There is probably a tremendous but invisible stellar orbit in which our very different ways and goals may be included as small parts of this path. Let us rise up to this thought. But our life is too short and our power of vision too small for us to be more than friends in the sense of the sublime possibility. Let us then believe in our star friendship, even if we should be compelled to be earth enemies. We have talked about the first 4 parts of the gay science. If this video, however, blows up, I am willing to further discuss the 5th part of the book as well. So share this video with as many friends. Comment about your favorite passage in the book, or maybe your favorite Nietzsche book, and make sure the algorithm picks this up. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't for more content on Nietzsche. We'll have a video on Twilight of the Idols coming out soon. If you want to watch more Nietzsche, we suggest that you start with our video on Thus Spoke Zarathustra. For now, we are happy to serve you with philosophy. Bye.